Hi, and welcome to Lesson 2. This lesson will focus on scores and cognitive ability tests. I would like to quickly introduce three terms before we move on to the slides of this lesson. The first term is called the raw score. A raw score is basically the amount of correct answers that you got on your own test. A percentile score, on the other hand, is how you compare the different candidates from different test groups. An example of a test group or a norm group could be the general population of employed workers, or it could be something more specific, such as people who share the same job profile as yours. The decision on whether to benchmark your score against this population or another depends on the employer and the test provider. The third term is called the subscore. A subscore is how you scored on each of the test's sections. So for example, imagine that you have a lower than average score on the numerical section of your cognitive ability test. Does that mean that you will be disqualified from the process? Likely not, because an employer always looks at the overall score. However, if the job in hand requires high numerical ability, you will probably be asked about this score later on in one of your interviews. So just take that into account. Let's move on to learn some more tips and information about your score. Let's have a look at a score example from one of the most popular and oldest cognitive ability tests, the Wonderlic Personnel Test. This is a 50-question test with an average raw score of 21. With a raw score of 28, your score will be higher than 88% of the population, and specifically for the case of the Wonderlic, it can even be benchmarked with an IQ score of 116. In the Predictive Index Learning Indicator, also known as the PILI, there are also 50 questions, and the average raw score here is 20. If you manage to score 30 on this test, you will be in the 87th percentile. Lastly, let's have a look at a sample score from Criteria Corp's Cognitive Ability Test. The link to the score report is available below this video. Here, there are also 50 questions, and the time limit is 15 minutes. The average raw score is 24. You can see that in the case of this candidate, although they scored much lower than the average population in the numerical section, their compound score is still higher than the score of 50% of the population. When examining most cognitive ability tests, it turns out that the population's average score is achieved by answering correctly slightly less than half of the total amount of questions in the test. There is no negative scoring. Mark an answer to every question in the test. And remember that all questions equally contribute to the raw score. This brings us to the end of Lesson 2. Let's move on quickly to Lesson 3, in which we will learn how to prepare effectively for your cognitive ability test.